Hi, welcome to our presentation on ADHD. And our presentation is titled Your Kid Has ADHD. Here's what you do. I'm Whitney Goodman,
I'm Chloe Holmgren.
I'm Jorge Buenrostro.
and this is it. Okay, so before we dive into it, what is ADHD? It's more than hyperactivity, even though that's what it's generally associated with.
So this formal definition comes from the DSM-5, and if you're unfamiliar with the DSM-5 it is the book psychiatrists use to diagnose mental health condition. It says, quote, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder defined by impairing levels of inattention, disorganization, and/or hyperactivity, impulsivity. And as a reminder, a neurodevelopmental disorder has onset in the developmental period and typically manifests before the child enters grade school. So we have three types of ADHD. We have hyperactive impulsive, combined, and inattentive. So starting with hyperactive impulsive, because that's kind of the one most people know, this is when you see fidgeting, impatience, very disruptive behaviors such as interrupting class or running around at inappropriate times. This hyperactive impulsive type is predominantly diagnosed in males. And then we have the inattentive kind. This is when you see them daydreaming, being forgetful, making careless mistakes, poor memory. And this inattentive type was formerly known as ADD, but psychiatrists have lumped both of them into ADHD now. So finally, we have the most common type of ADHD in the middle, which is a combination of any of the traits inattentive and hyperactive.
Okay, so IDEA includes ADHD within just the other health impairments category, so it's not really its own category. And says ADHD is having limited strength, vitality, or alertness that affects the student's progress in school or in any other setting. And it must interfere with the development and the functioning in social and academic settings. And like Chloe said before, there's the three different types. We have predominantly attentive, we have predominantly hyperactive impulsive, and then the combination of the two. And then there's two laws that we have associated with ADHD. We have Section 504 of I think it's the Rehabilitation Act. And then we have the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about some of the physical, emotional, academic, and social needs of people with ADHD. Starting with physical, a lot of times we see sleep problems and maybe some tiredness during school. It's very hard to fall asleep when your mind is kind of rushing all over the place. We also see a need to fidget and some trouble with hygiene just because of executive dysfunction. Some emotional needs. A lot of times when you have ADHD, you kind of feel like a failure. And so consistent reinforcement is really important to combat that and to keep students motivated. Also being conscientious of irritability and knowing when to intervene by redirecting the student's attention. And also emotional sensitivity. These are all important aspects of having ADHD that need to be addressed. Academic needs, a lot of the common accommodations for children with ADHD, they need extra time on tests. They might need more breaks to expel their energy, which is when you see them running around the room, that's because they're not provided that break. So giving them a more appropriate setting to do so will combat it when it's not appropriate. They also might need help with organization, and they might need distractions limited more than other students. And then some of the social needs that we see, they might not wait for their turn to speak or respect personal space. And they also might come across rude when speaking without thinking, and they'll say something that they might not mean. And this means that they're going to need to learn these social skills more proactively than other kids. Okay, so for this, we used an article by George J. DuPaul, Matthew J. Gormley, and Seth DeLaracy. And they kind of highlight 3 different types of interventions that you can do for students with ADHD. So behavioral interventions focus on social behaviors we may find undesirable, such as being interruptive in class. So being proactive, so you praise the appropriate behaviors and you give them a nonverbal cue to redirect inappropriate behaviors. And research has found that simply cueing these behaviors is very effective in improving them and getting the desired behavior instead. Daily report cards and token reinforcement are both able to provide frequent feedback. Token reinforcement means things like stickers, candy, or anything immediate. The daily report card method adds an extra benefit, which involves parents responding to the daily report card with some kind of reinforcement at home, such as like more TV time for having good behavior. And this kind of reinforcement really maintains motivation, especially at constant intervals like this. Moving on to academic interventions, this focuses on reading and math skills. Continually assessing understanding provides the frequent feedback we have already discussed as being beneficial. And clear expectations and maintaining momentum in lessons and activities prevents boredom and opportunities to be distracted. And computer-assisted instructional programs sometimes have a format that feels more like a game, and researchers found it way more engaging with this type of instruction. Peer tutoring is described almost like a game as well. Students are grouped into pairs and take turns being the tutor and the student. Points are awarded for correct responses, and whoever has the most points wins. And then finally, we have self-regulation interventions. This type of intervention targets an inability to detect errors and having self-control associated with ADHD. First, the teacher and the student identify a target behavior or behavior we want to see more of, like completing a task, paying attention, whatever the student most needs. Self-regulation interventions increase the likelihood of the child generalizing the desired behavior across more situations. And I listed the steps on the slide. First, you identify the target behavior, and then have the student themselves record the data related to the behavior, so they're self-assessing. And then an outside source will evaluate the accuracy, and then we reinforce it to maintain motivation.
As stated before, some students struggle with hyperactivity, so it is important to give them breaks, but not only physical breaks needed, but also mental breaks, because sometimes they get overwhelmed or they just don't like what they're reading. So you could just let them have like recess, maybe like a 5-minute break to go to the drink station, and then they could just like collect all their thoughts, get all the wiggles out, and then ready to learn right then and there.
Another important thing that like helps benefits children with ADHD and their needs is medication. It's not like the ride or die, like the most important thing, but it's definitely very helpful. It's a good way to help every aspect, the physical and the emotional and the academic needs of a child with ADHD. 60% of children with ADHD in the US take prescription medication, and that can be Adderall, Concerta, Ritalin. I'm not sure if I'm saying those right, but there's endless amounts. And they're all the medications, they're stimulant, and they help stimulate the brain in a way that the child can focus and can not get distracted as easy. It helps with short-term memory and focus. It even helps with sleep sometimes, because you know your brain's like quiets down the brain, and then it's not just like going everywhere. And there's been noticeable improvement in all settings from all the testing. And all this information was found on a WebMD article titled ADHD Medications Help Kids in School.
Okay, so these are ways to promote inclusion with different types of students with ADHD. So for example, an inattentive student may need more validation and tier 2 and 3 interventions to strengthen motivation. And remember, these tier 2 and 3 interventions are a lot stronger and more focused on the student. A student who's often tardy or late with deadlines may need a time management plan created with the help of the child's parents. They can also be paired with students who habitually turn assignments in on time in order to be a good influence on them. If a student often turns in incomplete work or work with many errors, they may need assignments broken up into smaller parts to prevent rushing through it or being too overwhelmed by the size of the assignment. Sometimes students with ADHD fall asleep in class. When you take medication that calms all the activity in your brain, sometimes the child will be so relaxed that they will just pass out in class. For this, see if fatigue is a result of the medication. That should definitely be the first step to removing that as a cause. Here we have this graph. This graph talks about how often students are spending their time in general education settings. Because of the way IDEA categorizes disabilities, this pie graph is based on the other health impairments category, which 2/3 of it is comprised of students with ADHD. So there may be other disabilities included in this data, but the majority of it is indeed from ADHD. And we can see that for an overwhelmingly majority of the time, they're like 66% of them are spending almost all their time in general education. And we see less instances where they are needed to be in a totally separate setting.
As stated before, a solution to not getting complete work is blocking an assignment. And that is where you just give the assignment in pieces. Let's say, for an example, you're doing a writing project. Maybe you just give the outlining and then like a rough draft, then a second rough draft where they turn it into the teacher, they get edits and they bring it back. And then you have the final draft where they turned it in. And that makes the student less overwhelmed and easily able to finish the assignments.
Another thing that helps is homework extensions. A lot of the time, the child is overwhelmed and exhausted by the end of the day. By the time they get home, that they just need, like, they just can't do it anymore. And so extended time and deadline extension is very helpful because it gives the child time to just kind of reset their brain and not stress about it that day, but still gets the work done. They still like have to work through the like sitting down and getting an assignment done, but it's not as stressful. It's not as overwhelming than it is if they have to do it in just one setting. A lot of people believe that homework extensions stunt the child's growth and progress, but it's actually been proven not to, and has been proven to be very helpful.
So you may be thinking like, who else can I talk to get more information about ADHD? Or maybe you need more resources, or you just need someone to, right? So the first organization, which I believe is the best named organization of all of them, is CHADD. This organization is just connecting young adults or teens with other people with ADHD so they can talk about their experiences, connect with each other, and just give the affirmation and attention that is probably going to help them through their academic career and through life. And then the American Academy for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry is just updated information about methods for parents to manage ADHD, for people with ADHD to manage their own symptoms, and it's just all around a helpful tool for everyone involved. And then the Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Central Arizona is a great one because it provides counseling and it even provides financial aid for families that are trying to help their child but don't have the funds necessary to be able to do so. And that's it.
So we have this little video. It's just kind of a little summary of everything we've been talking to, understanding and supporting your student and your child with ADHD, and we just like to play that.
Calibrating your teaching strategies to better support a student with ADHD will not only bolster your relationship, it will likely have a lasting impact on their success.
Something I want to add about that video is just it's more the video is specific towards helping your student, but a lot of those can be used in any setting, like in the home life and just anywhere, which is pretty cool.
Okay, and then we have a knowledge check, which we will do during class with a bunch of quizzes and questions for people to answer with their phone.
These are the references that we used in the slides, and our conclusion to end this presentation off is by saying that your child with ADHD is not trying to be misorganized or just hyperactive. It's something in their brain, and we are just trying to tell you, and using some trusted sources, probably we can help you on your way to provide your child with a successful academic career and hopefully a successful life as well.